Okay, folks, we gotta talk, and we gotta talk business. My whole life that I've lived in Vancouver, I have never seen a housing shortage in front of my own two eyes. I've seen quite the opposite. No matter what, at any time when they were screaming on the media about housing shortages, there was always stuff available. There was always empty condos, empty apartments. The problem was, those were the high end of the market, too expensive for any working type to afford. But they were there, they were available, they were empty. You could rent them if you. And then, because there was nobody renting them, and they were using those losses monthly, the real estate companies were using those losses to write down their earnings and pay less tax. Well, you had to pay more rent so that the portion would equal out more tax to the city, to the local governments, because they were starving for people to pay the tax. So each individual worker had to pay more because there wasn't that many people there, because they were lying to you about the housing shortage. There was never, if you had the money, you could walk up, you could always find something. It was an affordability crisis. All the places that were cheap and cheaper, somebody who lived there would say, "Oh, hey, I know someone." They would get the place by a reference, even when it was, really bad. There was places available if you could get in. The places that were cheaper in the good areas, and these were old shitbox buildings. Maybe they spackled some new paint on there or something, but they were really shitty rentals for cheap, and the landlords didn't want to fix it because it was essentially going to be a teardown in another 5 or 10 years, and they were just going to sell it to a developer to make their bank and then move out of the country to someplace cheaper to live. They always had a lineup. They had 30 applications. There was tons of people. They could pick and choose who they wanted. But for the expensive, for the luxury rentals, there was always stuff to rent. You just needed the big money bags money. And you could always, there was more of the expensive, overpriced stuff. It was more available. It was easier to get into. All this credit checks and bullshit. That's for the cheaper rent places. And if you show up with, big wads of cash, the real estate companies don't ask questions. If you want to rent out a Yaletown condo for, thousands of dollars a month, they don't ask any questions because they're desperate to rent that thing to show to their boss that they can even do their damn job because they're having trouble. And there was always empty places every block. There was always empty condos, empty suites. Could you afford to get into them? No. But only the cheap places was there a lineup out the door. For every 30 people that were lined up to get that cheap place, there was 40 overpriced rentals available. There was never a housing shortage in British Columbia, folks. They were always lying to you so that they could pump and get that investment capital into the development market. It was all a lie. It was all hype. All of Canada, since PET number one, has been, they say we don't have replacement population numbers. There's no 2.35, children per couple. So this is a 40, 50 years. This is like 2 generations worth of not enough replacement population. They haven't been able to import that many immigrants enough to even keep up with that deficit of the low birth rates. And yet you believe that we need more housing for more people who don't exist. We're foreigners who don't live here. We're going to buy all your housing and then rent it out to the locals. It's a population drop. We're finally waking up to that now that all the baby boomers are exiting stage left and they don't need their pensions anymore. So we got a real problem here, Canada, and it doesn't have anything to do with a housing shortage. There is a housing crisis, yes, but we have an overabundance, a massive 2-to-1 supply of housing for every person, man, woman, and child alive in the Lower Mainland who's actually living here. It has always been a complete fraud, folks. You don't want to believe me? Finally now in 2020, after 2025, the numbers are catching up and you're starting to look around and realize, yeah, that's an empty house, that's empty. Wait a minute. If 1 out of every 8 or 10 houses on my block is empty, well, all this new stuff, there's nobody moving in. So how does this math work out that we're in a house? The Chinese are laughing at you. The people who did this, the Euro banksters on the other side of the continent in Toronto and New York, they're laughing at you that you could be so stupid that right in front there was always a place to rent. You just needed the money to be able to shell out thousands and thousands of bucks, far more than any average income. It was always a scam on paper, on the ledger books with the banks, so that they could borrow more money to play in more foreign markets and also get bought out by more foreign markets. That's the whole buying out of all your property to be held by. It's not the foreigners, folks. It's the banks. It's the TDs, CIBCs, RBCs. They've been milking you like it's an extortion racket. You are a slave in Canada. That's what we've been living on in the last fucking 50 years since the fucking Pierre Elliott Trudeau was in the 60s. And that's when we got our communist government, folks. We got to do something more than just try and vote our way out of this again. We got to do peaceful resistance and just have a great big truckers walk away, start our own provisional governments, and then say, okay, let's see, we now have nationalized all the resources. Forget this foreign ownership. This has all been fraud to begin with. And so you, the government of Canada, has how much debt? We have no debt, and we have all this positive resources and the resource of the human resource of the people. It's easy, but nobody wants to realize how easy it is. The same as nobody wanted to realize that there's no housing shortage in Vancouver, and there never was one. Not in the whole last, I don't know, since the 70s. For real.